New audiobooks every week. On the Books Aloud channel, you'll find the best works of classic and contemporary literature, absolutely free. Subscribe so you don't miss any new releases, and be sure to click the bell icon to get notifications as soon as new audiobooks are published.
Texas Week by Albert Hernhuter. Meeting the little man who isn't there is rated a horrendous experience, but discovery that the man is there may be even worse. The slick black car sped along the wide straight street. It came to a smooth stop in front of a clean white house. A man got out of the car and walked briskly to the door. Reaching out with a pink hand, he pressed the doorbell with one well-manicured finger. The door was answered by a housewife. She was wearing a white blouse, a green skirt, and a green apron trimmed with white. Her feet were tucked into orange slippers. Her blonde hair was done up in a neat bun. She was dressed as the government had ordered for that week. The man said, "Are you Mrs. Christopher Nest?" There was a trace of anxiety in her voice as she answered, "Yes, and you are?" "My name is Maxwell Hanstark. As you may already know, I am the official psychiatrist for this district. My appointment will last until the end of this year." Mrs. Nest invited him in. They stepped into a clean living room. At one end was the television set. At the other end were several chairs. There was nothing between the set and the chairs except a large gray rug which stretched from wall to wall. They walked to the chairs and sat down. "Now, just what is the matter with your husband, Mrs. Nest?" Mrs. Nest reached into a large bowl and absently picked up a piece of stale popcorn. She daintily placed it in her mouth and chewed thoughtfully before she answered. "I wish I knew. All he does all day long is sit in the backyard and stare at the grass. He insists that he is standing on top of a cliff." Hanstark took out a small pad and a short ballpoint pen. He wrote something down before he spoke again. "Is he violent? Did he get angry when you told him there was no cliff?" Mrs. Nest was silent for a moment. A second piece of popcorn joined the first. Hanstark's pen was poised above the pad. "No, he didn't get violent." Hanstark wrote as he asked the next question. Just what was his reaction? "He said I must be crazy." Were those his exact words? "No, he said that I was." She thought for a moment. "Loco. Yes, that was the word." "Loco?" "Yes, he said it just like those cowboys on the television." Hanstark looked puzzled. "Perhaps you'd better tell me more about this. When did he first start acting this way?" Mrs. Nest glanced up at the television set, then back at Hanstark. "It was right after Texas Week. You remember, they showed all of those old cowboy pictures." Hanstark nodded. "Well, he stayed up every night watching them. Some nights he didn't even go to sleep. Even after the set was off, he sat in one of the chairs, just staring at the screen. This morning, when I got up, he wasn't in the house. I looked all over, but I couldn't find him. I was just about ready to phone the police when I glanced out the window into the backyard, and I saw him." "What was he doing?" "He was just sitting there in the middle of the yard staring. I went out and tried to bring him into the house. He told me he had to watch for someone. When I asked him what he was talking about, he told me that I was crazy. That was when I phoned you, Mr. Hanstark." "A very wise move, Mrs. Nest. And would you show me where your husband is right now?" She nodded her head, and they both got up from the chairs. They walked through the dining room and kitchen. On the back porch, Hanstark came to a halt. "You'd better stay here, Mrs. Nest." He walked to the door and opened it. "Mr. Hanstark," Mrs. Nest called. Hanstark turned and saw her standing next to the automatic washing machine. "Yes?" "Please be careful." Hanstark smiled. "I shall be, Mrs. Nest." He walked out of the door and down 3 concrete steps. Looking a little to his right, he saw a man squatted on his heels. He walked up to the man. "You are Mr. Christopher Nest?" The man looked up and stared for a moment at Hanstark. "Yep," he answered. Then he turned and stared at the grass again. "And may I ask you what you were doing?" Nest answered without looking up. "Guarding the pass." Hanstark scribbled something in his notebook. "And why are you guarding the pass?" Nest rose to his feet and stared down at Hanstark. "Just what are you asking all these questions for, stranger?" Hanstark saw Nest was bigger than he, and decided to play along for a while. After all, strategy. "I'm just interested in your welfare, Mr. Nest." Nest shrugged his shoulders. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a sack of tobacco and some paper. Holding a piece of paper in one hand, he carefully poured a little tobacco into it. In one quick movement he rolled the paper and tobacco into a perfect cylinder. He put the sack of tobacco and paper back into his pocket and took out a wooden kitchen match. He scraped it to life on the sole of his shoe and applied the flame to the tip of the cigarette. He puffed it into life and threw the match away. It burned for a few moments in the moist grass, then went out. A thin trail of smoke rose from it and then was gone. "Why are you guarding the pass?" Hanstark asked again. Nest resumed his crouch on the grass. "News is around that Dirty Dan the cattle rustler is going to try to steal some of my cattle." He patted an imaginary holster at his side, "and I aim to stop him." Hanstark thought for a moment. Strategy. He must use strategy. "Mr. Nest," he waited until Nest had turned to him. "Mr. Nest, what would you say if I told you that there was no pass down there?" "Why, shucks, partner, I'd say you'd been chewing some loco weed." "And if I could prove it?" Nest answered after a moment's pause. "Why, then I guess I'd be loco." Hanstark thought it was going to be easy. "Mr. Nest, it is a well-known fact that no one can walk in mid-air. Is that not true?" Nest took a deep drag on his cigarette and blew the smoke out of his nostrils. "Sure." "Then if I were to walk out above your pass, you'd have to admit there is no pass." "Reckon so." Hanstark began to walk in the direction of Nest's cliff. Nest jumped to his feet and grabbed the official psychiatrist by the arm. "What are you trying to do?" Nest said angrily. "Kill yourself?" Hanstark shook free of his grasp. "Mr. Nest, I'm not going to kill myself. I'm merely going to walk in that direction." He pointed to where the cliff was supposed to be. "To you it will look as if I were walking in mid-air." Nest dropped his hands to his sides. "Shucks, I don't care if you kill yourself. It's just that it's liable to make the cattle nervous." Hanstark gave him a cold glare and began to walk. He took 3 paces and stopped. "You see, Mr. Nest, there is no cliff." Nest looked at him and laughed. "You just take one more step and you'll find there is a cliff." Hanstark took another step, a long one. His face bore a surprised look as he disappeared beneath the grass. His screams could be heard for a moment before he landed on the rocks below. Nest walked to the edge of the cliff and looked down at the mangled body. He took off his hat in respect. "Little feller had a lot of guts." Then he added, "Poor little feller." He put his hat back on and looked down at the entrance to the valley. A horse and rider appeared from behind several rocks. "Dirty Dan!" Nest exclaimed. He reached down and picked up his rifle.
End of story. The next story begins now.
The Smiler by Albert Hernhuter. Have you ever written science fiction? Have your stories been rejected? Herein may lie the reason. Your name? Cole, Martin Cole. Your profession? A very important one. I'm a literary agent specializing in science fiction. I sell the work of various authors to magazine and book publishers. The coroner paused to study Cole, to ponder the thin, mirthless smile. The coroner said, "Mr. Cole, this inquest has been called to look into the death of one Sanford Smith, who was found near your home with a gun in his hand and a bullet in his brain. The theory of suicide has been rather hard to rationalize?" The coroner blinked. "You could put it that way. I would put it even stronger. The theory is obviously ridiculous. It was a weak cover-up. The best I could do under the circumstances. You are saying that you killed Sanford Smith? Of course. The coroner glanced at his six-man jury, at the two police officers, at the scattering of spectators. They all seemed stunned. Even the reporter sent to cover the hearing made no move toward the telephone. The coroner could think of only the obvious question. Why did you kill him? He was dangerous to us. Whom do you mean by us? We Martians, who plan to take over your world. The coroner was disappointed. A lunatic. But a lunatic can murder. Best to proceed, the coroner thought. I was not aware that we have Martians to contend with. If I'd had the right weapon to use on Smith, you wouldn't be aware of it now. We still exercise caution. The coroner felt a certain pity. Why did you kill Smith? We Martians have found science fiction writers to be our greatest danger. Through the medium of imaginative fiction, such writers have more than once revealed our plans. If the public suddenly realized that— The coroner broke in. You killed Smith because he revealed something in his writings? Yes. He refused to take my word that it was unsaleable. He threatened to submit it direct. It was vital material. But there are many other such writers. You can't control. We control 90% of the output. We have concentrated on the field, and all of the science fiction agencies are in our hands. This control was imperative. I see. The coroner spoke in the gentle tones one uses with the insane. Any writing dangerous to your cause is deleted or changed by the agents. Not exactly. The agent usually persuades the writer to make any such changes, as the agent is considered an authority on what will or will not sell. The writers always agree? Not always. If stubbornness is encountered, the agent merely shelves the manuscripts and tells the writer it has been repeatedly rejected. The coroner glanced at the two policemen. Both were obviously puzzled. They returned the coroner's look, apparently ready to move on his order. The thin, mirthless smile was still on Cole's lips. Maniacal violence could lie just behind it. Possibly Cole was armed. Better to play for time. Try to quiet the madness within. The coroner continued speaking. You Martians have infiltrated other fields also? Oh, yes. We are in government, industry, education. We are everywhere. We have, of course, concentrated mainly upon the ranks of labor and in the masses of ordinary, everyday people. It is from these sources that we will draw our shock troops when the time comes. That time will be? Soon, very soon. The coroner could not forbear a smile. You find the science fiction writers more dangerous than the true scientists? Oh, yes. The scientific mind tends to reject anything science disproves. There was now a mocking edge to Cole's voice. Science can easily prove we do not exist. But the science fiction writer? The danger from the imaginative mind cannot be overestimated. The coroner knew he must soon order the officers to lay hands upon this madman. He regretted his own lack of experience with such situations. He tried to put a soothing, confidential note into his voice. You said a moment ago that if you'd had the right kind of weapon to use on Smith. Cole reached into his pocket and brought out what appeared to be a fountain pen. This. It kills instantly and leaves no mark whatever. Heart failure is invariably stated as the cause of death. The coroner felt better. Obviously, Cole was not armed. As the coroner raised a hand to signal the officers, Cole said, You understand, of course, that I cannot let you live. Take this man into custody. The police officers did not move. The coroner turned on them sharply. They were smiling. Cole pointed the fountain pen. The coroner felt a sharp chill on his flesh. He looked at the injury, at the newspaper man, the spectators. They were all smiling cold, thin, terrible smiles. A short time later, the newspaper man phoned in his story. The afternoon editions carried it. Coroner Bell dies of heart attack. Shortly after this morning's inquest, which resulted in a jury verdict of suicide in the case of Sanford Smith, Coroner James Bell dropped dead of heart failure in the hearing room of the county building. Mr. Bell leaves a wife and...
End of story. The next story begins now.
The Outbreak of Peace by H.B. Fife. When properly conducted, a diplomatic mission can turn the most smashing of battle successes into a fabulous Pyrrhic victory. It was a great pity, Space Marshal Wilbur Hennings reflected as he gazed through the one-way glass of the balcony door, that the local citizens had insisted upon decorating the square before their capital with the hulk of the first spaceship ever to have landed on Pollux 5. 150 years probably seemed impressive to them, amid the explosive spread of Terran colonies and federations. Actually, in the Marshal's opinion, it was merely long enough to reveal such symbols as more than antiquated but less than historically precious. "I presume you have a plan to have me march past that heap," he complained, tugging at the extremely historical sword that completed the effect of his dazzling white and gold uniform. Commodore Miller, his aide, stiffened nervously. "Around to the right of it, sir," he gestured. "As you see, the local military are already keeping the route clear of onlookers. We thought it would be most impressive if your party were to descend the outer stairway from the palace balcony here, to heighten the importance of, to draw out the pomp and circumstance of opening the conference? Well, sir, and then across the square to the conference hall of the Capitol, outside which you will pause for a few gracious words to the crowd. And that will probably be my last opportunity to enjoy the morning sunlight. Oh well, it seems much too bright here in any case." The Commodore absently reached out to adjust a fold in his chief's sky-blue sash, and the Marshal as absently parried the gesture. "I shall be hardly less than half an hour crossing the square," he predicted sourly. "With the cheering throngs they have undoubtedly arranged, and the sunlight reflecting from all that imitation marble, it will be no place to collect one's thoughts." He turned back to the huge chamber constituting the office of the suite supplied him by his Polluxian hosts. The skeleton staff of men and women remaining occupied chairs and benches along only one wall, since the bulk of the delegation had been sent out to make themselves popular with the local populace. Hennings presumed the bulk of the local populace to be consisted of Polluxians, assigned to making themselves popular with his Ursan Federation delegation. His people would be listening politely to myriad reasons why the Polluxians had a natural right to occupy all the star systems from here to Castor, a dozen light-years farther from Terra. No one would mention the true motive, their illogical choice in naming themselves the Twin Empire. "Well now," he said crisply, "once more over the main points of the situation. No, Commodore, not the schedule of experts that will accompany me to the table. I rely upon you to have perfected that. But have there been any unforeseen developments in the actual fighting?" A cluster of aides, mostly in uniform but including a few in discreetly elegant civilian attire, moved forward. Each one was somehow followed within arm's reach by an aide of his own, so that the advance presented overtones of a small sortie. Hennings first nodded to the first, a youngish man whose air suggested technical competence more than the assurance of great authority. The officer placed his briefcase upon the glistening surface of a large table and touched a switch on the flap. "It's as well to be sure, sir," the Commodore approved. "Our men have been unable to detect any devices, but the walls may have ears." "They won't scan through this scrambler, sir," asserted the young officer. Hennings accepted a seat at the table and looked up to one of the others. "Myrelli Star," an older officer reported briskly. "The same situation prevails, with both sides having landed surface troops in force upon Myrelli 2, Myrelli 3, and Myrelli 5. The fourth planet being inhabited by a partly civilized, non-human race protected under the Terran Convention. Recent engagements?" No, sir. Maneuvering continues, but actual encounters have declined in frequency. Casualties are modest and evenly matched. General Nilsson on Mirelli 3 continues to receive Paluxian agents seeking his defection. I never thought to ask, murmured Hennings. Is he really a distant connection of the Paluxian Nilsson family? It is improbable, sir, but they are polite enough to accept the pretense. Of course, he rejects every offer in a very high-minded manner, and seems to be making an adequate impression of chivalry. He stepped back at Henning's nod, to be replaced by another officer. One minor space skirmish in the Agoki system to report, sir. The admiral in command appears to have recouped after the error of 2 days ago, when that Paluxian detachment was so badly mauled. He arranged the capture of 3 of our cruisers. Was that not a trifle rash? Demanded Hennings. Intelligence is inclined to think not, sir. The ships were armed only with weapons listed as general knowledge items. The crews were not only trained in prisoner-of-war tactics, but also well supplied with small luxuries. The Paluxian fleet in that system is known to have been in space for several months, so a friendly effect is anticipated. Hennings considered the condensed report proffered for his perusal. He noted that the Paluxians had been quite gentlemanly about notifying Ursun headquarters of the capture and of the complete lack of casualties. He also saw that while the message was ostensibly directed to the Federation flagship, it had been beamed in such a fashion as to be conveniently intercepted by the secret Ursun Federation headquarters on Agoki 7. That was a bit rude of them, he commented. We have never dragged their secrets into the open. On the other hand, sir, the Commodore suggested, it may be an almost sophisticated method of permitting us to enjoy our superior finesse. I am just as pleased to have the reminder, said Hennings. It will serve to alert us all the more when we sit down with them over there. An elegant civilian, a large man with patient, drooping features, stated that nothing had occurred to change the economic situation. Another reported that unofficial channels of information were holding up as well as could be expected. A uniformed officer summarized the battle situation in 2 more star systems. Those are positions we actually desire to hold, are they not? Hennings asked. Is action to be taken there? Plans call for local civilian riots at the height of the conference, sir. But can we lay no groundwork sooner than that? Sometime in the foreseeable future, at least. Take it up with propaganda. Blauvelt. It seems to me that the briefing mentioned an indigenous race on one of these planets. Blauvelt dropped his eyes momentarily, equivalent in that gathering to a blush of intense embarrassment. Hennings coughed apologetically. Well now, I should not pry into arrangements I must later be able to deny convincingly with a clear conscience. I can only plead, my dear Blauvelt, the tenseness of the past several days. The officer murmured inaudibly, fumbled with his papers, and edged to the rear rank. Someone, at Commodore Miller's fluttering, obtained a vacuum jug of ice water and a glass for the marshal, but Hennings chose instead to produce a long cigar from a pocket concealed beneath his resplendent collection of medals. My apologies to all of you, he said thoughtfully. I fear that any of you who may expect contact with the local population had better see Dr. Ibn Talal about the hypnosis necessary to counteract my little indiscretion. And now, what remains? Nothing but the prisoner exchange, sir, Commodore Miller announced after collecting the eyes of the principal officers. Hennings got his cigar going. He listened to confirmation of a previous report that had massive exchange of sick and wounded prisoners had been accomplished, and learned that the Ursuns now suspected that they had accepted unknowingly about as many secret agents as they had sent the Paluxians. Oh well, he sighed, as long as the amenities were preserved. We must be as friendly as possible about that sort of thing, or run the risk of antagonizing them. Seeing that the Commodore was tense with impatience, the marshal rose to his feet. An aide deftly received the cigar for disposal, and the party drifted expectantly toward the balcony doors. From among that part of the staff which would remain to man headquarters, an officer was dispatched to alert the Paluxian honor guard. One more touch before the die is cast, thought the marshal, as two young officers opened the balcony doors to admit the blare of trumpets. Cheers rolled successively across the square, rising like distant waves from somewhere beneath the gigantic banner that draped the Capitol opposite with fiery letters spelling out Peace Conference. With a dramatic gesture, Hennings held up the sheaf of reports they had just reviewed. Smiles disappeared in response to his own serious mien. "So much for the hostiles," he snapped. He tossed the reports to the officer who would remain in charge. "Now for the actual war." Pivoting on his heel, he led them smartly out to the ornate balcony stairway that curved down into the sea of cheering Paluxians. End of section.